Hi there. So today what I will do is just demo through the search engine that Group 15 have built using solr lucene. So first things first, you need solr lucene installed locally using the command prompt. This contains the solr config file, XML schema, which is going to be important, and I will discuss it later. And it also contains the documents you wish to index and retrieve based on the query. Once you've done that, you could just simply use the command prompt to create a cluster using the solr cloud, which is just essentially an umbrella term for a suite of functionality in solr, which allows you to manage a cluster of solr nodes for scalability, fault tolerance, and high availability, for example. Once you've done that, you can just access the cluster, which is here. So this is essentially the UI. So here are the different data sets that we've used. So different document collections that we wish to retrieve. Tech products, which is just a set of 15 documents. That's how we trial the search engine. Then we try to test the limits of the search engine using the films document collection, which contains 1100 documents. So starting with the tech products data set. So I'm just going to, oh yes, and just to quickly mention, both these datasets are a mixture of PDF, JSON, XML, CSV, and HTML files, which are stored locally. And we decided that our datasets, it is important that we use a mixture of different file types just to really test the limits of our search engine. So let's start with querying. Of course, you can query. So if I query, for example, electronics, and I execute query, it gives me the number of documents it returns, so 14 with a max score value, etc. Here are all the documents, each one in one of these sort of curly brackets. Each document returned has different fields, so ID, name, etc. And I'll discuss how these are created in a bit more detail later. So the ranking is actually done using BM25. So here it is. It tells you how it's done. So BM25 using these parameters right here. So of course, we're looking at the title, body of the documents, etc. And the retrieval itself, the indexing, sorry, is done through TF IDF, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail later. But yeah, so as you can see, you can literally whatever you want. Of course, I've selected the tech products document collection, execute query, and music, only one is returned. So there are other useful things you can do. You can filter by field. So one of the fields we find here is price. Okay, so I can query for that. So the price of this item is 399.0. So 399.0. If I execute query, I get the same return, of course. I can, query by category, for example. So field category, electronics. As you can see, 12 documents are returned that have electronics within the category field. I can also query multiple terms. So for example, CAS plus latency. Right, so 2 documents are returned. And one of the things and useful features of solr lucene is that it does the usual NLP tasks, such as standardization of the words and removal of the capital letters, etc., and removal of little filler terms such as with and automatically. solr lucene also has the ability to do spell checking, for example. So another thing I can do, for example, is query for 2 terms, but place more importance on one term over another. So, for example, if I have the words electronics and music, and my query needs to return anything with the word electronics in it, but not necessarily return anything with music in it. Let's execute query. I have 13 results. Okay, so with the words electronics within it. However, let's just say I insist on the word music being included. I can just put a plus sign here, and look, it returns one with both electronics and music. All right, so again, I could do the exact same thing with this. So just a few examples. So 8 Mile, for example, famous movie. Yep, we've got a return here, the 8 Mile movie. Let's just say I want directed by someone specific. I can literally do the same as before. So I could just write directed underscore by and search up a very famous movie director. I don't know any, but I'll just try Max. Let's see if something comes back. Okay, nothing. But if I did want, you know, to see how many films was directed by Curtis, for example, who directed the 8 Mile movie. Yep, there you go. So as you can see as well here as well, same thing, Curtis Hall. And again, the capital letter, you know, was standardized as standard. So yes, how's solr lucene actually doing all of this? So there's actually in the background stored locally a solr config XML schema, which has the ability to do what they call field guessing and determines what fields should be indexed. And the schema is actually managed at a runtime using the schema API. And it's typically managed through the UI. So you can actually add fields from here. This actually requires a lot of trial and error and a lot of brute force. And once you've indexed a document set using, you know, your defined fields, you can't re-index them again. You're going to have to do the whole thing again. So it just involves a lot of trial and error and brute force, which is actually quite problematic, and if used commercially can cause issues. The indexing method, as discussed earlier, is just a TF-IDF. Again, just the number of times a word occurs in a given document. It uses the lucene TF-IDF similarity Java docs based scoring. So again, the background of all of this is the solr config XML schema, which defines indexing options, request handlers, highlighting, spell checking, and many other different configurations. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope, let's just do one more query. Oh, apparently no Titanic in this data set. What I will do actually is I will make sure to include the data set as a CSV file in the upload so that you can look through the actual data set and check it out for yourself. Thank you for listening, and more details on the background workings of this search engine will be within the presentation.